for pre-need funerals, burials, or cremation since 1975. It's Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Sylacauga, Childersburg. Mr. William R. Billy Hodges died at his residence in Noonan, Georgia on March 24th. A graveside service will be held at Evergreen Cemetery on Saturday at 2 o'clock. I'll be officiating that service. In lieu of flowers, you may consider a donation to Cal Farley's Boys Ranch in Amarillo, Texas. Fond memories and expressions of sympathy may be shared at CurtisandSonFH.com. Mr. Hodges was born here in Sylacauga and spent a number of years here. He is a graduate of Sylacauga High School in 1957. Grew up in Coosa County. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, North Chapel, directing. Betty Kissick Beasley, age 80, of Sylacauga, died at her residence on March 25th. Funeral service will be Sunday at 2 o'clock in Curtis & Son North, with the Reverend Eric Franklin officiating. Burial in the Tallahatchie Cemetery. Visitation Saturday at Curtis & Son North from 5 until 8 p.m. Online condolences at CurtisandSonFH.com. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, North Chapel, directing. And funeral service for Bill Hamilton, age 74, of Sylacauga, will be Saturday at 11 o'clock from Curtis & Son North, with the Reverend Gene Webster officiating. Burial in the Evergreen Cemetery. Visitation tonight, 5 until 8 at the funeral home. Mr. Hamilton died March 24th at Grandview Medical Center. He was a lifelong resident of Sylacauga and started Hamilton Plumbing back years ago. And he would pick and grim at his plumbing shop right there at Busy Corner for 15 years in a row. He also had a local television program called Hamilton Country, where he played country music. He online condolences at CurtisandSonFH.com. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, North Chapel, directing. Funeral service for Michael Anthony Murphy, known as Frog, age 51, will be today at 2 o'clock in Westview Baptist Church, with Brother Jimmy Roberts officiating. Burial in the Evergreen Cemetery. Mr. Murphy died Tuesday, March 23rd at his residence. He was an employee of Honda Manufacturing and a member of the Westview Baptist Church. Radley Smith Funeral Home in Sylacauga in charge of the arrangements. Funeral service for Mr. Eddie Walker will be today at noon from Community Funeral Home Chapel in Sylacauga. Burial in the Sylacauga Cemetery. Community Funeral Home, Sylacauga, directing. And funeral service for Francis Borden will be Saturday at 1 p.m. from Community Funeral Home Chapel in Sylacauga. Burial in the Pine Grove Cemetery. Visitation today at the funeral home from 1 until 7. Online condolences at communityfuneralhome.org. Community Funeral Home, Sylacauga, directing. Celebration remembering the life of Mr. Sammy Lee Booker, age 64, formerly of Talladega, will be Saturday at 3 o'clock from Morning Star Baptist Church Cemetery, with the Reverend Lanoa Ely officiating. Public viewing for Mr. Booker will be Saturday from 9 until 1 at the funeral home. S.M. Goodson Funeral Home and Crematory, Talladega, directing. Mr. William Miller, age 63, died March 24th. Community Funeral Home, Sylacauga, with the arrangements. Funeral service for Mr. George Thomas Tony Vernon Jr., age 56, of Alexander City, is this afternoon at 1 o'clock from the Chapel of Radley Funeral Home. Reverend Wayne Cowhick officiating. The family receiving friends today, 11 a.m. until 12:45 at the funeral home. Mr. Vernon died March 20th at his residence. And memorial messages may be sent to the family at radleyfuneralhome.com. Radley Funeral Home, directing. Mr. George Irvin Fowler, age 72, of Sylacauga, died Tuesday. Visitation for George will be Saturday from 10 until 11 at Weguffka Family Worship Center, followed by a funeral service at 11. Radley Smith Funeral Home in Sylacauga in charge of the arrangements. And funeral arrangements to be announced for Mr. Albert Nixon, age 69. Those arrangements to be led by S.M. Goodson Funeral Home and Crematory in Talladega. Mr. Nixon died on Thursday. And celebration of life for Mr. Edward Charles L.C. Scott, age 87, will be March 27th on Saturday at 1 o'clock from New Maryland Baptist Church Cemetery. Visitation is today 1 until 3 at the funeral home. S.M. Goodson Funeral Home and Crematory in Talladega in charge of the arrangements. This obituary report brought to you this morning by Curtis and Son Funeral Home, the North Chapel on Highway 21 in Sylacauga, and the Childersburg Chapel on Highway 280 in Childersburg for pre-need funerals, burials, or cremation since 1975. Curtis and Son Funeral Home. Call 256-245-4361. Curtis and Son Funeral Home, Sylacauga, Childersburg.